Allow me to tell you about the 3 most important days of my life. I wouldn't want any of the 3 to think I'm playing favorites, so I'll list them in strict chronological order. The first was Friday, October 13, 1972. Friday the 13th. On that date, as a Fokker turboprop crash-landed in the Andes with 45 passengers who would ultimately devour each other to survive, Antonio and Carla, that is to say my mom and dad, 18 at the time, conceived me in the back seat of an unprepossessing off-white Citroën Diane. The 2 teens had parked their vintage junker in a large empty square on the outskirts of Rome, included in the zoning plan by far-seeing city administrators as a handy refuge for lovebirds. It was a bleak setting, filled by the occasional abandoned refrigerator and stacks of battered cars. A perfect backdrop for a tender love story. Antonio and Carla had met that afternoon at a birthday party for Manrico, a sweaty, overweight loser from Frascati who'd been pining after Mamma ever since middle school. She'd just turned down his offer to join him in a slow dance to the languid notes of a young Elton John. And that's when she saw Papa, staring at her from a distance, and almost choked on her tuna, mayo, and tomato panino. And truth be told, Papa was the kind of guy who regularly made girls choke on their panini. He was tall, skinny, and too cool for school. He played the electric guitar, and regularly wrote rock music cribbed shamelessly from lesser-known songs by the Rolling Stones. He resembled Sean Connery's better-looking brother, but with a scar on one cheek that gave him a mysterious smoulder that 007 could only dream of. He could hold a room full of people wrapped for hours with stories about how he'd got that scar. Depending on the audience, either he'd received it in a bloody brawl in an open-air market in Mexico City, or else he'd been stabbed by a hulking rugby player from the mountains of Bergamo, brooding over a 2-timing wife in a welter of painfully justifiable suspicions. Or else it had been that time that Frank Sinatra broke a bottle over his head because he couldn't stand what a good singer Antonio was. Papa was a professional bullshit artist, so outstanding in his lying skills that if he'd set his mind to it, he could easily have become Prime Minister of Italy. But I, and I alone, knew the truth, whispered to me by a dangerous double agent from the south, namely my Aunt Pina. Papa had taken a tumble with his tricycle when he was 3, and had landed face first on the sidewalk. Be that as it may, Antonio the lady killer liked to retire each night to the back seat of his Citroën Diane with a different blushing passenger. That night it was Mamma's turn, and she was indeed seduced, but not, however, abandoned, because at the very instant of supreme pleasure, a red Fiat 500 smashed into the rear fender of my parents' car. At the wheel and riding shotgun were 2 half-drunk 20-year-olds from Frosinone, completely unaware of the role they'd played in tearing a condom at a crucial moment, thereby directly contributing to my advent on life's grand stage. So let me say it now, guys, wherever you may be. My sincere thanks. That fateful Friday, the 13th, I'd been set down on planet Earth as an uninvited guest, but that never kept Antonio and Carla from showering me with a fair to moderate amount of parental love, at least for as long as they were married. That's another story, though, and an infinitely sad one. If I'm up for it, I'll tell you about it later. The second most important day of my life was September 11, 2001. While everyone in the world was staring at their TV sets as special news broadcasts played and replayed footage of 2 Boeing 767s slamming into New York's Twin Towers, giving the rest of the world a new enigma to puzzle over, and the American people a new enemy, I was in a restaurant at the beach with all of my closest friends, and Paula, the love of my life. It was a classic end-of-summer dinner, and it had been planned for weeks. But in truth, this was no ordinary grilled seafood banquet. It was the night I was going to ask Paula to marry me. The furthest thing imaginable from her mind and my friends' minds. An elderly waiter had agreed to be my accomplice. For a €20 tip, he'd douse the lights, play our song, which, for the record, was and remains always on my mind, in Elvis's immortal rendition, and triumphantly wheel in a gigantic mimosa cake with the engagement ring perched on top, concealed inside a bar of extra dark chocolate. It was a meticulously planned event, a night sky so bright with stars that it looked like a Christmas manger scene, a group of friends so warm and sincere that it could have been a TV commercial for an Italian after-dinner drink, and a gentle sea breeze so agreeable that it could have been God's ceiling fan set on low. Every detail was perfect. Or almost. I'd failed to reckon with my best friend Umberto, who is a veterinarian. When the cake made its entrance, he leaped from his chair and prankishly swiped the chocolate bar, exclaiming, "Guys, this chocolate bar's all mine!" Crunch. Next thing you know, the gold engagement ring had shattered a molar. Emergency run to the dentist's office. So long, magical and unforgettable romantic interlude. Despite the pathetic outcome of the evening's main event, Paula said yes. We were married early the following year in a charming little Gothic church on the outskirts of Milan, and it's one of the few things I've never regretted. Paula is the star of my life, and as far as I'm concerned, she deserves at the very least an Oscar for her performance in the role of my wife. The story of her starring role in my life comes later.